September 20th, 2014, from Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was the Mississippi State Bulldogs versus the Louisiana State Tigers. As MSU went up against LSU, and the Tigers came into this game ranked number 8 in the nation. Mississippi State won the toss, and they chose to defer. And the Tigers started off, and they went 3 and out, so the Bulldogs would take over with about 13 minutes left in the first, and they marched all the way downfield, 6 plays, 51 yards in about 2 minutes, capped off by a 9-yard touchdown pass from Dak Prescott to Danielle Wilson. So it was now 7-0 Bulldogs over LSU. LSU then took over, but they would punt the ball, and Mississippi State got the ball back. They ended up punting it back to LSU. So now LSU had the ball with about 6 minutes left in the first quarter. They drove all the way down to the 1-yard line of the Mississippi State Bulldogs, but then Hilliard was stuffed for a 1-yard loss. And then on 4th and goal from the 2, Anthony Jennings was stuffed for no gain, as LSU was kept out of the end zone and turned the ball over on downs. Now Mississippi State took over on their own 2-yard line, and it took them just 1 minute and 20 seconds to go 98 yards in 5 plays, as they got some big plays from Danielle Wilson, as he caught a 26-yard pass. He also caught a 44-yard pass. Josh Robinson had a 23-yard run, and it was all capped off by a 3-yard touchdown run by Robinson that made it 14-0 Bulldogs. The Bulldogs were off to an early lead. Now LSU took over, and they brought the first quarter to a close, and they opened up the second, but they would end up punting the ball, and the Bulldogs took back over with about 11.5 minutes left before halftime. They would end up getting a field goal 5 plays later, a 27-yarder, to make it 17-0, as they scored 17 unanswered points to open this game. LSU then took over with about 9.5 minutes left before halftime. They would end up punting the ball. Mississippi State then took over, but they would punt the ball back to LSU. So now LSU had the ball with about 4 minutes left before halftime. They would end up kicking a 30-yard field goal to put their first points on the board 8 plays later to make it 17-3. So now Mississippi State had the ball with about a minute and a half left before halftime, but they would end up punting it, and LSU took over. But this game would go to halftime with the score 17-3. So now Mississippi State had the ball to start off the second half, but they ended up fumbling it on the kick return, and the Tigers ended up scoring as Danielle would have recovered it and returned the fumble 25 yards for the touchdown, and it was now 17-10 as the Bulldogs' lead was cut to 7. So now Mississippi State would get the ball back, and they would end up answering that mistake with a touchdown, a 56-yard touchdown run by Dak Prescott to make it 24-10. So now the Tigers took over with about 13 minutes left in the third, but they would end up going 3 and out, and then Mississippi State got the ball, and 3 plays later, Dak Prescott found Jameon Lewis for a 74-yard touchdown to make it 31-10 Bulldogs. So now the Bulldogs ended up kicking off to LSU, and they took over with about 9.5 minutes left in the third. They would end up punting the ball, and Mississippi State now had the ball, but they would end up going 3 and out. So the Tigers took over, but they went 3 and out. Now Mississippi State would get the ball on their own 1-yard line with about 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes left in the third, and they brought the third quarter to a close, driving all the way down to the 2, but a penalty brought it back to the 12, so they opened up the fourth on the LSU 11-yard line. They ended up having to settle for a 28-yard field goal that made it 34-10, as the Bulldogs were up on the Tigers by 24 points at the beginning of the fourth quarter. So now the Tigers drove downfield. They went 67 yards in 7 plays in about 2 minutes, capped off by a 1-yard touchdown run from Hilliard to cut the lead, as it was now 34-16. So they now trail by 18 points with about 12.5 minutes left to play. The Bulldogs would now punt it back to LSU. LSU would go 3 and out. Now the Bulldogs took over with about 8 minutes left on the clock. They were on the LSU 3-yard line. It was 4th and 1, but Nick Griffin was stuffed for a 2-yard loss, and they turned the ball over on downs. Now the Tigers took over on their own 5-yard line. They went all the way down the field, 95 yards in 6 plays in less than 2 minutes, capped off by a 31-yard touchdown pass from Harris to Dupre to make it 34-22. So now Mississippi State would get the ball with less than 2 minutes on the clock, but they would end up fumbling it, and now the Tigers took over with about a minute 40 on the clock. They would end up scoring 2 plays later as Harris found Dupre as they connected now for a 30-yard touchdown that made it 34-29. It was now a 5-point game. So then they went for an onside kick, but Mississippi State recovered, but they would end up having to punt the ball, and so now LSU got one last shot down by 5 with just 20 seconds left on the clock, and they completed it on first down for 22 yards as Trevin Jarrell got the ball to the 42-yard line as they were right there at midfield, and then Brandon Harris ran for 12 yards. Now the ball was across midfield at the 46, but then on the last play of the game, Brandon Harris was intercepted by Will Redmond, and this game came to a close as the Mississippi State Bulldogs upset the Louisiana State Tigers 34-29. So the Tigers lose in a big upset as the number 18 goes down to the Bulldogs. And in this game, Dak Prescott was 15 for 24 with 268 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Anthony Jennings was 13 for 26 with 157 yards, and Brandon Harris came in and he was 6 for 9 for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. The leading rusher in this game was Josh Robinson of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. He had 197 yards rushing off of 16 carries as well as a touchdown, and Dak Prescott had 105 yards off of 22 carries and a touchdown as well. All combined, the Mississippi State Bulldogs rushed for 302 yards, and they held LSU to just 89 yards rushing. Tavin Durrell was the game's leading receiver with 124 yards receiving off of 6 catches. Dupre also had 120 yards off of 4 receptions, 2 of which were for touchdowns. And for the Bulldogs, Jameon Lewis had 116 yards off of 5 receptions, 1 of which was for a touchdown. And Wilson had 91 yards receiving off of 4 catches and a touchdown as well. So Mississippi State pulls off the upset. No one thought that they could do it as they went in the Tiger Stadium and they beat LSU 34-29.